Welcome back to the channel. Hayden, I've seen the trailer for Longlegs a few times throughout the summer, and I always walked away from it thinking, this looks cool and it looks fun, but I really don't know what this movie's about. And it turns out that they couldn't really show us what it was about because it would have scared the living hell out of us if they showed it in trailers.
Very true. And also it's probably spoiled some major developments.
Yeah,
for sure.
But anyway, welcome back. Welcome to all of you watching. We are here to talk Longlegs, the newest horror movie out in theaters, starring Nicolas Cage, amongst others, and also produced by Nicolas Cage. So he had a good hand in this.
For sure.
Is Maika Monroe? Monroe?
I believe
is
correct pronunciation on that.
Also our star here, alongside Blair Underwood and others. I don't know if I'd say like a super elite cast, but it's a bunch of great performances throughout. So,
sure.
What first thoughts? I mean, a summer horror movie, middle of July. How did this land with you?
So this is one of those moments that like this movie had a lot of really cool viral marketing and a lot of stuff going into it. And I kind of deliberately tried to avoid it because when I know I'm going to see something, at that point I check out of trailers and stuff, right? If I'm there for it, like I'm sold. I just want to get the whole story right. But I did have an experience with this movie where I don't think like ever in my adult life where I was actually anxious to go see this movie because of like, I was like, this shit's going to be, I think it's going to be freaky. It's going to mess with my head. And, I've become kind of a horror aficionado recently. I feel like this year, almost half of the movies we've reviewed or at least seen have been horror. And so I have a pretty high tolerance, but this movie genuinely freaked me out and is sticking with me. And I'm thinking about it more often than I want to, which is a good sign.
That makes me happy because on our Strangely Awesome show, our weekly podcast, like in the past, and it would always annoy the shit out of my co-hosts when I'd want to talk horror movies in the fall and I'd be outnumbered. Now I'm not anymore.
Hell yeah.
So Steven, if you're watching this, sorry. But
yeah, right.
Yeah. No, I mean, horror's always been a fun one for me. I can get behind the campy 80s slashers, but this is not that kind of movie. This is a very different type of horror. Think more on the lines of like Hereditary, Silence of the Lambs, Seven, if you've seen that. To me, it felt like a blend of those three. And it is essentially a crime-solving mystery, kind of, but a really effed up one.
For sure. And I think this is one of those movies that has a lot of clear influences, but it doesn't ever really feel derivative of any of those things. I think it's playing tribute to them. And you mentioned Silence of the Lambs, you mentioned Hereditary. I think those are the two biggest influences, especially Silence of the Lambs. That's going to get the most direct comparison, right? Because it's a movie about a young woman who's an FBI agent trying to hunt down a notorious serial killer. That's the log line's the same, right? But that's kind of it. And I think there's a lot of other influences from, I noticed things like Twin Peaks, as far as just visually, the way things look, the way things sound, the way things are shot sometimes. And that's
a lot of the wide shots.
For sure. And that's the first thing that stood out to me about this movie, is that it has such a distinct like visual language to it. And I was honestly kind of surprised by that, because you don't see that from a lot of movies nowadays. And I feel like a lot of low budget horror sometimes especially is trying to chase trends, get a return on investment. But this movie has its own identity while still referencing a lot of things that I love and that a lot of other horror fans do, which is going to get people in the seats for something. Really
last comparison from me for people looking for like a lighthouse here, so to speak, of what to expect is the other thing I thought is like, this is what the X-Files would be if it was on like HBO and could just totally let loose.
Oh yeah.
I think 100%, like the best Monster of the Week X-Files episodes, like 100% this what it would be.
Sure.
What did you think of? So in the opening, we get a different aspect ratio, right?
Oh, and love that. I always love that. It gets me every time.
What do you think? So we get like the old school, Was it four to three?
Something
what is
like
it?
that.
Yeah.
It looked 4-3, but then they did some weird rounding around the edges to make it look kind of home video-esque.
Yep.
Which I really enjoyed. And I think the intro of this movie is really good. And without spoiling that, it does a really good job of setting the tone and giving you context that this is a killer who's been at large for a long time. We kind of get some personality, but they cut at the exact moment before you would see what he looks like. And I think that was really, really smart of that. Because especially like I'm for some reason I don't like having dramatic irony in movies a lot of the time. I want to be in the journey with the characters. And so I liked that I felt like I knew as much as like someone reading the paper in the 90s about a serial killer would, right? I knew the clues, I knew some of what to look out for, but we didn't know what this person looked like until the FBI did, and it was time for a full-scale manhunt, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, the aspect ratio part for me was great because first the thing it says is like we are looking at something from the past, right? And even within the context of the main story of the film, which is in the 90s, the Clinton administration, we see Clinton's picture up in the FBI everywhere. So it's set in the 90s, but the initial opening to the film is in the 70s. And we're not totally sure what we're looking at until later. But I like that too. I like going on the journey, especially in films like this where you have, detectives or FBI agents or whatever trying to solve murders or serial killers or whatever. Like, I want to learn the bits and pieces with them and try to figure it out. That's the fun part. And we were able to do that here. The score too, like especially when you get to the opening credits and the screen, then the aspect ratio shifts, right? You get the whole.
I love that it's gradual. It's expanding with the red and the font. It looks very much like something you'd see in an intro of an old 80s, 90s, maybe even 70s, honestly.
Yep.
Old school horror.
Yep. Really so loved. Everything there, just really great choice, I think. All of that. So from a stylistic standpoint, really good. From a story standpoint, we enjoyed it. I think, for us, this was a really fun movie. And Hayden, what did we score this thing?
Well, before we get into the score, I want to get into Nicolas Cage's performance because I think that's one of the big draws for a lot of people of this movie, and it's one of the big ways they've marketed it, which makes sense because he's a well-known actor, but he's not necessarily. I would say Nicolas Cage is more infamous than famous in a way, right?
At this point, yeah,
he's an A-lister by virtue of causing chaos. You know what I mean? And
is he an A-lister? I don't know. I was thinking about that while I was driving home.
I think so. Just how well known he is in the name recognition. But he in this movie, I think a lot of it rests on his shoulders, but I think less of it than you would think. Because the way that I feel like going into this movie, I expected to see a lot more of him than we did. But I think limiting and restraining how much of him we got, I think really, really worked because that character is so intense and just so much that I think you could have overdone it quickly, but they knew they had a ridiculous performance and a really good performance. Like, I'm not saying ridiculous to be like, this is bad, this is too silly. Like, I think for the character, it totally works because this is a really just genuinely kooky, just like, I don't like to use the term freak, but I think like it's kind of apt here, where this is just very much a strange, reclusive, violent person who.
And I like it because, as we've said, there's a lot of parallels between this film and Silence of the Lambs. And this is one way where they really stand apart.
Yep.
That the villain in Silence of the Lambs is highly educated and well-spoken and really soft-spoken. And that's part of the scariness. Right. Here, it's all the opposite of that. It is like very, some people might say overperformed by Cage. I don't think so. I think it was fine. I think, he's portraying this character as very messed up, and that is clear. Character is. Absolutely. So, I got behind the performance. That was good. So, anyway, that's it. Score. What do we have this as?
I think we're at a 9. We went back and forth on it between 8.5, 9, because there are some things about this movie that don't necessarily land at 100%. But that being said, I don't think any movie is perfect. I mean, not even a 10 is perfect, right? The movies we have given 10s, right, we have some issues with. I think there are a couple things we'll get into in spoilers that detract just a little bit, but this is a really great movie, and I think Delivered was genuinely terrifying and kind of an instant classic. I feel like I feel like I said this about Maxine, and I agree with both, but for different ways. I feel like this is going to be one of those horror movies that stands the test of time a lot and has legs and gets popular again every year around Halloween. And I think a lot of that is because it has such a distinct style, and Nicolas Cage's character has such distinct iconography that I could see this becoming a pop culture moment.
Yeah, this is a word of mouth movie. I can see that 100%. You know, it's going to get a lot of steam behind it because, you know, of the audience perspective and people just talking about it. And I think that it'll do well. This movie has cult classic written all over it.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure.
15, 20 years from now, people are going to be like, oh, yeah, Longlegs, that's great. So let's talk spoilers. Spoilers from here on in, everybody. So if you want to see it first, fair warning.
And you should see it first, and you should see it as late as you can. Go to it as crowded of a
leave the video running and go to the theater.
And then come back and actually rewatch it.
Yep. So, okay. This movie is super intense, and it opens with a scene where, you know, we see a little girl interact with the character of Longlegs, played by Nicolas Cage, for the first time. We hit on that a little bit. Then we move forward into, now we see Lee Harker, FBI agent, played by Maika Monroe, and she is with her partner, Agent Horatio something. I can't remember the last name, but and they're like canvassing, you know, looking for the killer, etc. They've, you know, they got a tip or whatever.
They know he's in a neighborhood, but they don't know what house. So they're doing good old. They describe it as good old fashioned door to door, like you see in the movies, like you see on TV.
In the movies.
Yeah, which is a great setup, and I think I like that setting a lot to start us off, because I feel like they did a really good job with this movie of making it feel like very familiar. Where I feel like no matter where you're from, if you're in North America or even parts of Europe, I think the setting will look really recognizable to you. And I think that's part of what makes it scary, is that
it's the feeling that this could happen anywhere, right? And
this guy could just be in your neighborhood. You never know.
Yep. So Agent Harker gets out of the car and she's just like, it's that one. It's that house. I know. So we see that she's got like some psychic ability or something right away. Partner being a little skeptical. It's like a reverse X-Files, right? The female character is your like bought in person. The male's the skeptic. So they go, and then the intensity just full on hits.
Yeah. Because she's not even super sure of it. It's intuition for her, right? It isn't having to back it up. And the guy's like, we can't go on a hunch. And she's like, just trust me in this one. He's like, all right, fine. Knocks, opens the door, and is like, you know, hey, I'm FBI. I'm here to talk to you. Or do you know anything about? And then instantly we just see like his brains get blown out. And it's very shocking. It's nasty. It's that you can definitely tell it's done practically, because it looks like, and there's a couple instances of gore in this movie that look a little more real than I would like them to. And I almost wonder if some of the still frames are actual like case file crime scene photography. I wouldn't be shocked. But yeah, and then you get this scene where it's like, you can definitely tell she went to the Jodie Foster school of acting, because it's very much the scene where she goes in the Buffalo Bill house and she's got her shoulder always against the wall, totally checking her quarters, like locked in, trying to find this guy.
The plastic up everywhere just adds so much to
disgusting, dude. It's gross. It's gross atmosphere. I don't know what the practical application of that was, if it's just trying to prevent fingerprints or DNA.
It's also
some weird thing for him.
It makes it harder to see you too, right? Like it clouds.
Oh, true. It's reflective.
So, yep.
Yeah, I don't think of that.
So you never knew, like, if you go through these sheets of plastic, like the dude could be right there. And it's hard to know. So that upped the tension like so much. It was such a
It
great
did.
opening sequence. She gets to the top of the stairs, and then he's just like on the butt, like surrendering.
Mm-hmm. And
And
it's not Longlegs. And that was
no,
what I think was really cool, and what was the really bold choice there is that I was immediately like, oh my God, we're getting right into it. I can't believe this, right? Because most of the marketing we've seen of Nicolas Cage's character is like him in custody in like the kind of interrogation room. And so that's what I was expecting. I was like, okay, maybe this is a situation. I thought it was going to be like Silence of the Lambs, right? Where he's in custody, but he's still somehow managing to do things. Maybe he gets out. And so this was a really great red herring. I absolutely loved this scene.
then we, Agent Harking sees the or Harker, sorry, sees the all the evidence in the case, and she's able to sort of decipher a pattern. And she picks
Mm-hmm.
out that, or they see like the birth dates pattern, and then she deciphers a couple other things.
Yeah.
And birthdays become a huge central focus
Mm-hmm.
of what we're
Yeah.
looking at here.
And that's skipping ahead kind of a bit because the
Yeah.
FBI picks up on her intuition and is like, okay, what's the deal here? So they have her go into this room where she takes this test where they're like,
Oh, yeah.
the classic
Right.
showing her pictures and like, what is the 1st
Mhm.
word that comes to your mind? And then also doing the like, guess a number between zero. It was either 0 and 100 or 0 and 1,000. I think it was 0 and 100.
0 and 100, yeah.
0 and 100 inclusive. And she does that several times. And there's a really great line a little later where they're talking about like it's I think it might be the next scene because it's when her handler, her superior, whatever, right, is in the car with her. She's in the back seat, almost like a kid, and he's showing her one of the crime scenes, just the exterior of the house, and kind of talking about the case and talking about her performance on her little exam. And it's really fascinating to see how like even though she's clearly a person with some crazy either really good intuition to like psychic powers at this point, she's still very doubtful of herself where they're like, you were able to beat that numbers guessing game 8 times. And she's like, yeah, but I also failed it 8 times. But the odds of being successful on that are like 1 in 102, you know?
Yep.
So, or 1 in 100, whatever it is.
So the fact that she was 500 on it is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she's now putting together the pieces little by little. Like I said, birthdays play a huge role here. And then, as soon as we realize birthdays play a huge role, then we realize that her partner boss, his daughter has a birthday coming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that connects like right away. And you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And then Agent Harker goes home and calls her mom. And that first conversation is a telltale thing too, because that conversation is very strained, right? You can tell the relationship isn't like quite right. But
no. She's trying to have a relationship with her mom, but it seems like it's out of guilt rather than actually wanting to be there. And that's a really difficult layer, but I think it's also something a lot of folks experience as they become adults and their parents age and distance happens and they realize that either they're so different from their parents that they don't really connect on anything, or they disagree with each other in a lot of ways that it's every visit will be tense. So really great scene. And established that character super well just through a phone call. You know what I mean? Like you don't even see her, you just hear her on the phone. I think twice before we see her physically, and you get a sense of who she is, or at least who we think she is at the moment, and it's a really cool character.
The first set of calls, one of the last things she says to her daughter, to Agent Harker, is, will you at least come up for your birthday next week? And I'm like, oh shit, another birthday. Here we go. So it kind of paints the picture that all these people are involved somehow, some way, or will be by the time it's done. So anyway, we continue unraveling the mystery. We don't want to go scene by scene here because we'll be here like forever, but we fast forward, we see more of like Nicolas Cage's character. We see that there's like these creepy ass dolls involved.
When they go to, there's only one, because it's always that, for context, they're always killing a family is what happens. The family always dies. The Longlegs leaves the Zodiac style ciphers, right, and signed with Longlegs in his handwriting. but they never actually able to find any evidence that he's in the house. So we think like he's either convincing these people to do this or coercing them or whatever it is. And there's only ever been one instance where someone survived one of these killings. It's usually a whole nuclear family wiped, and there was a girl who happened to be at school at the time. So they go to her home to investigate, which is the house is now long abandoned. She's been living in a mental institution for a number of years. I think 20 at that point.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So
they go up there, they find a crucifix like nailed to the floorboards in the upper level of like the barn. Pull the panel, and there's this case underneath that has this like weird doll. And it's like ceramic, super lifelike, with human hair.
That's the part that's the freakiest, right? Is the human hair. And I love the scene where they take her, the doll, Harker, and you gotta figure out his name for me because I feel bad I keep forgetting.
Agent Carter.
Oh yeah, Agent Carter, yeah. So her partner who's with her this whole time, pretty much the whole time on this case, they go to like this morgue almost, and they have a dude do an autopsy on the doll. And
yeah,
he has this weird throwaway line about like, yeah, it felt like it was whispering my ex-wife's name to me. And you're like, that's creepy, but the way it's played off, it's kind of funny and got some laughs in my theater. And I was like, this guy's just a fucking kook, right? He's one of those weird Twin Peaks-esque side characters that's just kind of there to throw you off. And
that scene reminded me of like every episode of like NCIS or whatever, where they have like the one scene in the morgue with that person.
Yeah.
And they're like, but here's the one really cool thing. And then they show like this metal ball that's in the head of this, and there's nothing inside of it except there is.
Right. And they're like, can we cut it open? And he's like, I just dropped my phone. Oops. So like, fell right out of my pocket. That was not Longlegs coming to get me.
Yeah, hope not.
Right. But yeah, he's like, can we cut it open? And he's like, yeah, but don't find it in there. It's hollow. Which to me, that was like the only time in this movie that I'm like, y'all are fucking dumb. Like, this is like movie. Like, because the FBI would never be like, oh, okay, there's probably nothing in there.
Yeah.
Like, because you cut it open, you see if there's an engraving or a little piece of paper. But I don't know. I think that was one of those things of Carter is supposed to be very bureaucratic, and he's very by the books, and he's very much, you can tell he's very loyal to the U.S. government. He doesn't really question things. He kind of does things the exact way they're supposed to. And as soon as this case starts looking paranormal and weird, he's like, yeah, I call bullshit.
Right.
So I think it does make sense for his character why he wouldn't look. And I think it also makes sense for Harker that she's kind of a very timid person at this point and is not really one to stick up for herself or advocate. She feels like she's very much trying to earn her position, right? So
there's also a power dynamic between the two, right? Like he's her
big time
supervisor. So yeah. So anyway, now we know about the dolls. Fast forward a little bit. They figure out kind of where Longlegs is and apprehended. And, you know, this pretty much takes place at what, like end of Act 2, beginning of Act 3. Like it
takes some time. Yeah. Cause she does a lot of investigative work because she starts to piece together, because we're leaving out the visit with her mom, which I do want to talk about. I know we said we go scene by scene, but that's one you gotta hit on. And I think that is where the Hereditary comparisons are going to come from the most. And the way that scene is I love how it's shot, or like the production design of it, because the house is pretty dark. She's letting in really only a little bit of natural light. She's got shit everywhere. And this is like a complete hoarder house. And the only space where there are walls that are clear, there's like crucifixes and like paintings of, I think, like Jesus and the president. So you very much get a sense of the kind of person this woman is. And she talks to her mom. And I can't remember the specifics of how it happened, so try to remember if you do. But as she's talking to her mom, she realizes that she's involved in this, and she starts to piece out that she thinks that Longlegs made the attempt on her life at some point on her 9th birthday when she was 14. And so she digs through all of her records. You know, her mom's like, I'm not going to talk about that day. I don't want to bring that up. Nothing good will come of that. But if you want to If you want answers, everything of yours is still in your bedroom. And that's such an eerie scene too, of her like trying to go up the tiny little lane in the stairs, past all of the garbage that's stacked up, and she finds the stack of Polaroids, brings them back home, and sure as shit, one of them is of Longlegs' face.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably the scariest moment of the movie, man.
It's worth mentioning too, because we'll come back to this in a minute, but there's one door she can't get in the house.
That's true. The basement, yeah.
Yeah. So
there's a little cockroach that crawls, or some sort of bug that crawls out from underneath, and she tries to go and look, and then right as she does, her mom comes down and interrupts her and says something, and she thinks nothing of it, brushes it to the side. And that's like, on retrospect, that is such a moment right there. Once you learn what's down there and how close she was to finding it and how early, it's... Ugh. This is one of those movies that I can't wait to rewatch.
That gave me some of the biggest chills, like when we saw it, of the movie, honestly, was realizing what was behind that door. You know, anyway, now we fast forward to they're able to figure out kind of who Longlegs is. They're able to capture him. What took place, Hayden, in the interrogation sequence? Were you prepared for that?
So, no. And even before that, you see there's this creepy scene where everyone's just standing around in the FBI office watching the interview tape of, I'm getting chills thinking about it, watching the interview tape of him. And it's shot very, very close to him. And it reminds me, it's very much like, in performance too, it's so Heath Ledger Joker of like when he would send the vlogs to the news. And, you know, he's singing Happy Birthday. And I had a lot of people have talked like whatever hype it made me sick, whatever, right? I will say this is an anecdote from a person that y'all actually know, right? And I hope trust. That scene in the movie, just the birthday scene, before that, I've never had this experience happening before. I had to like actively try not to throw up.
Really?
I don't know what it was. There was just something so unsettling about it that I felt like right in here, I was like, and I'm just thinking about it again, I'm like actively thinking, like, it makes me fucking nauseous.
So you don't want that to become the universally accepted version of Happy Birthday?
I don't. And I also don't want this to become a popular Halloween costume, even though I fucking know it will be.
Oh, it might, yeah.
I might do it, honestly.
Should. And just go up to everybody and be like, I wore my long legs today. Like at the beginning, yeah.
What does he even mean by that? Is that like
I don't know, and that's what makes it creepy as shit, is that you have no idea what it even means.
Yeah, because that's right in the beginning. He says a little bit like, oh, I wore my long legs today. What if I just, and then he bends down, camera cuts to the credits right before you would see his face. And that was one of those things that I was trying to figure out, like, is that like from some nursery rhyme or from some parable or some phrase, or is that just like his thing?
You know, when we do these, I always put a clip, like a 9 to 10 second clip from the film up, like leading into our review. And if I can get one of Happy Birthday, it's going there.
Oh God. just to make me sick again.
Or if I can get one of I wore my long legs today, you know, we'll get that too. Anyway, the interrogation room happens next. Were you ready for that? Like, what was your impression?
I mean, I don't think there's any preparedness possible for how that ends.
It's another way that it's really different from like Hannibal Lecter, right? Like Hannibal Lecter would never do this. So yeah.
No. So he's very much just like, he has this weird parasocial relationship with her where he talks about it. It's almost like it's both like meeting a celebrity and also meeting like a distant relative. Like, it kind of feels like if you've ever, like, you know how sometimes you have those relatives that you like, you know, from Facebook or whatever, but you don't actually talk to them. And then you see them for the first time in 5-10 years. And you're like, why does fucking great Aunt Gretchen know everything about me?
Right.
It's like that dialed up to 11 in this such perverse way. And you learn later on why he has that attachment to her, right? Because in a sense, it's like, in a weird, twisted, fucked up way in his mind, like she's family to him, right? She's distant, long lost family to him. And they have this conversation, and I think it goes pretty paint by numbers for a minute, but I think it, as far as what they're talking about and how the back and forth goes and the dynamics, but I think it works just because of Nicolas Cage's performance. And then she's like, you know, she has that moment where she's like, you're done. You're never going to do this again. You're going to be in here for the rest of your life, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you're right. I am done. And he smashes his head on this steel table with such force over and over again that it kills him. And they don't shy away from what that looks like.
Oh, no. Like the blood splattering on the wall more and more with each impact. As she
but even just like the prosthetic of his face, like the teeth getting because at one point, the first or second time he does it, he like takes a break to is it the second time I think, and then he's like he coughs up a couple teeth and then goes back, and that's what's just like so visceral about that scene, and it sets us up into such an interesting place for the third act too, because it's like the guy that this movie is titled for is dead. And there's at least 40 minutes of this movie left, and we know he has an accomplice, and we don't really have any leads. So it's just kind of like, where is this going? And I think that was a really smart place to set us up in the third act, especially because it gets absolutely crazy.
So we know it goes back home. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. Real quick, I wanted your thoughts on the character dynamic between Carter and Harker there, because it fundamentally changes as a result of that moment.
See,
immediately after, when she walks into the hallway, it's changed.
There's part of me that thinks he's scared shitless. Like, this is just so freaking creepy. So he almost just shuts down in a way that's like, nope, we are going to focus on what is like provable and within these confines of thought, you know? And he's almost like insisting and wishing it to be true that he is the only killer. There is no accomplice. We're done. You know,
that's interesting, because I've also seen people say that, like, read that as he's being sarcastic and being like, way to go, you killed our only lead, now we have nothing, you reset us back to square one. And I think, honestly, for him, both of those are probably true. I think there's part of him that's trying to deny it, and then also part of him that's like, well, now I'm screwed, because he knows that they know that there is one death that's needed to happen to complete this triangle of how they've mapped it out. And he knows that it always is a girl's 9th birthday that's on the 14th of a month. And his daughter is turning 9 on the 14th of that month. So it's extremely deeply personal for him, and the stakes are super high. And like, he's just walks away. And at that point, we don't really see him for the rest of the film until like the very end, right? She gets a new agent. She gets a new agent that's, you know, kind of her co-pilot, and she has a very different approach where she's like, they go to her mom's because they realize her mom's a suspect at this point.
Her mom knows something.
If not a suspect, she's withholding. She's at the very least obstructing justice at this point. So they go there, and like, I feel like Carter very much had her back, right? Was the kind of guy that like, and I really liked their dynamic because it's kind of classic where buddy, like cop, where it's, you got the older grizzled vet who's closer to retirement and just wants to be done with this shit, and he doesn't feel anything except for this one person that he takes under his wing. And in a weird way, he's really paternal to Harker in a lot of this, and honestly is the only person in the world that we see her talk to and enjoy. And so I feel like when she goes to her mom's at this point, like, she's not just looking, she's there, it's as an FBI agent looking for information, but she's also there as an adult child meeting her mother.
Yes.
And she cannot
get
both of those things. And that's what's really hard about that scenario, is she will either find the answer to this case or get some comfort, but no matter what happens, she loses something. She fails in some way. And it's a great place to start Act 3.
Yeah, so she goes home to look for mom. Other agent with her, and she's like, what do you want me to do, basically? And she's like, well, I think I should go inside alone to get her, and then we'll say we need her to come in for questioning, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. She goes inside, other agents sitting in the car. We see behind the car, here's Mom. Mom's got a shotgun.
Good old-fashioned double-barrel shotgun.
Yep. And Mom just walks up to the window and just blasts her head off. Like, from both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's thorough.
Yeah. And it's a great performance, by the way, by Monroe here, where you see, like, she sees out the window this occurring.
Mm-hmm.
At least the second shot. She heard the first shot and then goes to the window to look, sees her mom, and just the moment of realizing that it's her mother that's been the, like, accomplice, so to speak, the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It's unspoken, but it's such a great performance. Like,
it is.
You can just see, like, the shock on her face and just trying to, like, wrap her head around it.
Mm-hmm. And I think the cinematography there is really good restraint. And I think for as batshit as this movie gets at times, there's some really clear moments of restraint that they do here. The first one is way earlier on, right? Where I'm trying to say this without getting demonetized. But when you have a character like Nicolas Cage, who is a serial killer, a creep, who has an affinity for very, very, very young girls, that usually goes a certain way in these kind of movies, especially in procedurals. And it doesn't go that way, which I think I appreciated. Mm-hmm. I think that's some restraint. I think that was the right call. You don't have to go for every possible shock value you can.
Right.
And I think also showing this death from the perspective of Harker, of Lee, was really fucking smart, because we don't need to see the gore and the shotgun go to her face and all the pellets in her cheekbones, or like, we just got our nastiness a couple minutes ago, right, with Nicolas Cage. So they let us see this as she's seeing it, and I think it makes it even more terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not about the gore, it's about the moment, which is like, my mother just killed my partner. You know what I mean?
So we've got two more twists to get to, and we're running out of time. So she confronts Mom. Mom's got a shotgun pointed at a porcelain doll of her.
Mm-hmm.
And, a little weird. But
same make and style of all the other ones.
Yeah.
That we've seen of all the other
So
victims.
blows doll's head off. Harker falls to the ground, goes unconscious, wakes up in a bed in the, like, workshop of Longlegs, which turns out is what's behind door number 2 for the basement.
Oh,
do you think he was down there when she was there and the door was locked?
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure, I do. And I think you could even read that he might have been there when she was a child living in the home. Is not beyond the realm of possibility for some of her childhood, right?
Well, for sure, like after that initial day, because we learned that Mom made a deal with the devil, not so to speak, but for real.
Yeah.
To save daughter's life.
Yeah.
Saying that she would help support Longlegs, murderous thing. And then I think Longlegs moved in at that point.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's really freaky too, is the whole time you hear, she talks about the man downstairs, and he talks about the man downstairs. It says he works for the man downstairs, works for Mr. Downstairs. And you think, and there's two things that come to mind in this. The first one is just like the proverbial boogeyman, right? Every kid, when you're a kid, especially if you watched more scary movies than you should have as a kid, is fucking terrified of their basement when the lights are off. It's just a thing. Yep. Every kid turned the lights off in the basement to come up for dinner and sprinted up the stairs and didn't look back. It's core memory.
Well, and it's such a play on words too against the man upstairs, right? Like when people think on God or whatever, it's the man upstairs. Right. When you say the man downstairs, you immediately just think the devil. No, they quite literally meant downstairs. Like it was such a cool moment. It creeped the shit out of me. It was like, I don't think you've seen this movie, Blair Witch Project, but it's at the end of the movie when
I need to.
Like they're in the house and the fingerprints on the walls and shit, and you're putting it all together and you're like, oh my God. And it's like some of the scariest shit I've seen. Mm-hmm. That was there. Like when in your head, you're like, all of this shit was happening like right there.
Yep. And I think that's probably the moment in this movie that is going to stand out to me the most. It's one of the best, like, oh shit reveal moments in a horror movie because it's not most movies, and I'm not even going to say lesser movies. I think there are movies that are better, equal to this, that have done this too. It's usually a big, grandiose reveal, right? Like
I was just going to say that.
Most movies would have done this. He would have said it in the interrogation scene, and then they would have cut to the basement. They didn't
or like she stands up, and it would have been the camera shot that like spins around her, showing the whole room, and then cutting to mini flashbacks along the way, showing him working there or something, and it would have been like, that's overdone. This was beautiful and perfect. Like it just allowed us to process it.
Yeah,
and it was so good. Okay, one last twist to get to, because there have been so many. Like there's been such a shortage so far. So turns out mom has been dressing up as like a nun, going door to door or going to these families' homes where it's like our birthday on the 14th, whatever, and give it, hey, like I have a present. You're a winner. I have a present from the church. And then they open it and it's a porcelain doll of their daughter. But inside the doll is the spirit of Satan himself.
Which, like, when you say that out loud,
it sounds a little obnoxious.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. It is. Objectively, on paper, it's ridiculous. But I think they build up to it so much in this movie that it works. And I said earlier in the non-spoiler section, there's something about this movie that usually doesn't work for me. And it's this. I usually, like, when I'm watching something scary and you don't know what's going on, it's a serial killer, they're trying to uncover this mystery, and the answer is, like, the devil, that shit almost always pisses me off.
Yeah.
And it just feels like a cop-out. It honestly does. It usually does. But in this case,
my question is, is Satan like or boxes Satan's kryptonite? Because it's not until the doll comes out of the fucking case that the thing works. It can be in the house, but it's not. If it's not out of the case, then you're whatever. Once it's out of the case, then it like takes over Dad's mind essentially, and Dad goes on murderous rampage and then kills himself. She gets a weird phone call, Harker, and is like, "You're late for the birthday party of Carter's daughter." And she puts it together. Yeah, she puts it together. She's like, "Oh shit!" So she speeds down there, and the dad. Were you tricked when Carter answers the door and it seemed like everything was fine? Because she rings and she's like, "Is everything okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, whatever."
For a second, I figured that maybe mom was on her way or something, right? But as soon as he sat down, I could tell, and I think that's a testament to, because we've talked about this. I feel like a lot this year. We're watching all these movies where everyone's playing multiple people. We got Mia Goth playing Maxine and Pearl. We got Joel Edgerton playing everybody in Dark Matter. And so this is another one of those ones where this actor, you can tell that you can see the subtext, right? You can see that it's almost like he's pretending to be himself.
Yep.
And then as it goes on, like he's presenting the fatherly picture, but he's also saying really awful shit. And you can tell, right? He's like, can you go grab the cake? And he's like, you can come and get the fucking cake with me, and we're going to stay in the kitchen. It's just like so terrifying.
Well, and he's like, we'll cut the cake. We're going to find something to cut the cake. And she's like, we'll be right back. And he's like, I'll be back. You won't. You'll be staying in the kitchen, something like that.
Yeah. And it almost seems like she's trying to break out of it. I don't think like she's been possessed. I think like it's like he's fully possessed. She knows there's a darkness in the home. She knows there's something wrong, but she's aware of it. And that's one of the scariest tropes to me in horror to think about, is being fully present of mind, but your body not having any control over your body is terrifying.
Yep. So our hero is still processing all of this while Carter's wife is getting stabbed multiple times in the kitchen. Like you hear it going on in the background. That was part of like, for me, I was like, that seems a little weird. I feel like she might try to intervene or something, but whatever, dramatic effect.
Well, I think also part of it is it's a really complicated situation to be in, because I think she's thinking of the kid a lot in this scene. And
she's thinking of the whole chess match, not she's going to sacrifice that piece off of it or what. Like,
yeah, because okay, no matter what the circumstance is, if you're a 9-year-old girl and you see somebody kill your fucking dad in front of you,
right,
and then that woman is like, you have to come with me, I'm gonna keep you safe, I'm gonna protect you, you're like, no. And I think Lee knows that, and knows that if she ruins this kid's trust in her, nobody makes it out of this alive.
Yep, that's fair. So mom meets her end in the kitchen as promised by Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Carter comes back with the knife. She shoots Carter twice, right? It looks like she went for like shoulder shots, essentially, but I don't know.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. They both looked pretty like center mass to me.
Were they? Then I might have just not seen it right, but
yeah, the first one might have been more of a wound, and the second one was a final. But
because he kept coming after the first one, and so the second one might have been more center mass.
Lethal. Yeah, and I think, and if you notice too, like she has really good trigger discipline and situational awareness as far as like when to escalate, because she does not. Like she did the FBI training. She had the montage somewhere off screen, because she doesn't shoot him until like the last second, right? She doesn't shoot him until he's like within stabbing range. And I think, to not get too into the weeds of it, but now that I think about it, the chest, that shot, I believe, is how like special forces and special operatives and special agents, the FBI, I believe, at this time, I don't know if they still are, were trained to shoot 2 shots. And you go the first one center mass, and then you let the recoil kind of follow into like a forehead to be extra sure.
Sure.
But all that to say, I think she was trying to kill him. She didn't try to shoot him in the leg. I think she knew he was a lost cause at this point.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, mom's all that stands. Well, kind of. I mean, there's Satan too, so I guess we shouldn't rule that part out. But there's, mom and Satan are all that stands between this little girl and a long life. So, Harker has to make the decision to shoot her mother in the head, which
it's very unfortunate.
Had to be hard,
incredibly traumatizing, right?
Yeah, but I think that moment, as fast as it unfolded, I think it was acted very subtly too, in the way that like, this is really hard for me to do, but I know I have to do it.
It's instinct. I feel like she does it out of survival, and she doesn't process it until after.
Yep.
It takes a second.
And it's almost like the protector in her took over, right? But knowing like her mom had said to her, just said, I will do this over and over and over and over and over again to protect you, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like just this little girl and this family will die, like many, many more will too. So then she tries to turn the gun on the doll's head, and the gun won't fire.
It's just clicking.
Yep. And we're kind of done at that point.
Yeah. We get one more. We get the click. You think it's going to go to black from there, and it does for a second. And then we get Nicolas Cage saying, "Hail Satan," and blowing a kiss to the camera, talking directly to the camera, which was a really great character moment, and I think put some much-needed levity in that. And then we get the credits of the T-Rex song from the 70s, which was...
It's a good choice, I thought.
It is a good choice. And I realized after... I didn't realize, I'm not smart for this on my own. I watched some ending explained and that kind of stuff videos, because I was wondering the whole time, like we knew from the trailers Nicolas Cage had that weird fucked up face, and his skin was bleached and kind of burnt, and maybe he had like some really bad plastic surgery done. And I was thinking, like, what is his deal? Like, is it an accident? Is he just like what's the deal, right? And if you look around of the people that are in the posters he has up in the basement, in his little room, his little office, if you want to call it that. And then the musicians on the radio, he's just really into glam rock. So it seems like he just did that to make because he's like, I want to look like all these rock stars I love.
It didn't work really well.
No.
But I mean, credit for trying, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
If
Committing to the bit.
Hayden, if we pick on him, he might turn into a bad person eventually. We don't want that.
Jesus. What's your read on the ending here? Because I think it's fairly open. I think it's fairly ambiguous, but I feel like there are a couple forks in the road that it's pointed to where it could go. I'm curious where you think it would land.
I feel like this is I'm not sure if it's teeing this up for a sequel, but I like when movies like this don't have a neat, clean bow on top at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is such a messed up story, like in all the best ways, that it shouldn't have a clean, clear ending. Like, nobody comes out of this unscathed, even if you live.
Mm-hmm. Fundamentally ruins you as a person for the rest of your life.
So I kind of liked the, figure out what you think the ending is on your own approach to this. I'm good with it.
What's your guess?
I'm good with. It's good that I'm good with it because it's what we're going to get with Horizon too. It seems.
Jeez.
But I think the spirit is still very much alive, and I wonder, like, is she going to take her mother's place in order to protect the little girl?
I think so. That's the read I got, and I think that's what they're setting up. Whether there's a sequel or not, I don't know. I would guess probably no.
I don't think there needs to be.
I don't either. I think this is really great as a standalone story, and I don't know. Like, for me, I'm more into, for horror directors, I would rather see what else can you do and what other kind of stories can you work with and themes can you explore, rather than like just give me too long, two legs. Like,
right.
I don't need a bunch of these.
This director, by the way, is taking on a Stephen King story next, Oz Perkins.
Okay. That's cool. I know that.
It's the Monkey movie. I think it's just called Monkey. It's from a Stephen King short story from Skeleton Crew. And so that is coming, I think, in February. If I remember right. So,
did you know that Oz Perkins is like a really weird Nepo baby, by the way?
I did not. From who?
His dad played Norman Bates in Psycho.
Oh, I did know that. I just read that like yesterday.
Isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm.
So
that is nuts. Yeah. So cool. Well, he stayed with the horror theme then, and
yeah,
I don't know. This movie, Hayden, I feel like is going to be slightly divisive, but I feel like a lot more people are going to enjoy it than not. Mm-hmm. I think the people who need a lot of like action to happen a lot of times might not love this totally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this movie builds the tension and then gives you something really horrific to look at for a minute or two.
And you got to really pay attention, right? Like, I think there's a lot of horror movies that I think the use case for a lot of horror movies is you put it out small in theaters, but you make your money from streaming deals. Back in the day, DVD rentals, right? People buying them on Blu-ray or digital or whatever, renting them, right? And I like that you can, you watch with your friends, you watch around the Halloween season, you put on in the background, a Halloween party, sleepover, whatever. And I feel like a lot of people are going to end up watching this movie at home and probably missing certain things. I'm not saying that like you're lesser or you're not as smart or whatever if you don't see this in a theater. I think it's
hard to be focused for 2 straight hours. Yeah.
Right, and it commands your attention, but it also, I think, needs it to work.
Yep, it does. And, I mean, but it's timed well because we'll see this movie hit digital probably right around September 1. So, heading into the, Halloween season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it'll work. And given that it'll hit there September 1, it might hit a streaming service by middle of October, which would be the ideal, I think, for them. So, yeah. But like we said earlier, 9 out of 10. This one went long, so we're gonna get out of here.
Mhm.
But there was a lot to say on this. Who would have thought we'd do like an almost hour long on a horror movie?
Did we really? Have we been
Yeah,
that
we're at
long? Wow.
like 54, 55 minutes right now.
That's
So
crazy. It's dense,
yeah.
man. I mean, I feel like we showed. At least I tried to show some restraint with that.
I know there's a lot to get into. We could talk about more, but yeah, it's worth going to see it. Just don't go expecting sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's messy and I mean, in a good way, but it is very violent and not shy about hiding the violence
No.
or not shy about showing the violence. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I understand.
thanks everybody. Check out our other
y'all.
stuff on the channel too, and subscribe for more video reviews of movies and lots of other stuff too. StrangelyAwesomeGames.com is our website. Check us out there as well. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.